Welcome to the Provider's Report, where we delve into the world of value-based healthcare. Our mission is to empower healthcare providers with the knowledge and tools they need to deliver exceptional patient care. Each episode, we explore best practices, innovative strategies, and real-world examples of how to achieve the highest standards in patient communication and outcomes. Join us as we transform the future of healthcare, one conversation at a time. Hey guys, today we have Dr. Rebecca Deyo. She is the principal host of this podcast, and she has a crazy story to tell us. So Rebecca, welcome to your podcast. And tell us what happened on the 28th of October last year, 2023.
When I say my life was flipped upside down, I mean it was flipped literally upside down. So we thought the best way to start this podcast was really to dive into a personal story about how disability and injury can impact so many parts of your life and how the providers that you see really makes a difference, especially when it comes down to their training and what their motives are. So literally in October, I was playing volleyball like I always do. It was the first big indoor tournament of the year, something I've done every October for who knows how many years. And I went up to save a ball at the net like any other day, came down on one leg, and my leg literally snapped in half. So yeah, very crazy. And I immediately fell to the floor. I heard the noise. I'm a provider. I knew something was very, very wrong. Little did I know how wrong it actually was. And so I literally ended up tearing every single ligament in my knee possible except my PCL, plus multiple compression fractures to my tibial plateau.
Wow. Now, what was the immediate reaction of your fellow athletes?
Fellow athletes, I mean, none of them knew what to do. They were all panicking. I'm not the kind of person that ever gets injured. I do my rehab. I do my prehab. I've played sports for many years. I've been well taken care of by chiropractors my whole life. So for me to have an injury and have it be that severe just kind of astonished the whole gym, really. So yeah, immediately everyone just didn't know what to do. And I knew it was pretty bad because my pain levels were 20 out of 10.
They were skyrocketing.
Yeah.
Now, what was your immediate reaction? What did you do next?
In all reality, it showed me what it's like to be a real patient, because the first thing I thought of was not volleyball. It was not, my pain. It was, how am I going to go to work on Monday?
Right.
How am I going to be a mom to my kid? It was immediately like the things that truly matter. And I think it's really important to understand that every patient is going to have a different reflection point in that moment. So it taught me so much about what really matters in life.
And that's a really good lead in to really the overall structure of what we want to get to with this episode, which is your priorities as a mom. And there's a long story with that as well. So, but before we get to that, what was the next steps? You phoned your husband.
Yeah. And I believe the words I said on the phone were, I destroyed my knee. Yeah. So he immediately panicked. He realized that it was something serious. It wasn't just a little knee injury. I didn't know how serious it was, though, of course, without the MRI, but I had to drive 1 hour home with my leg elevated, and I couldn't bend my leg at all. It was just like stuck in this weird, it was stuck in this weird position, but the pain levels were just so high. I knew something was very wrong. But what I thought was, maybe I just tore my meniscus. Maybe this is going to be really bad for a week or two, and I will bounce back and be okay. I truly thought I would be able to go about 4 to 6 weeks and then maybe get an MRI if I was still having issues. So I feel very fortunate that I knew such an amazing orthopedic surgeon. So I messaged him pretty shortly after, and I said, this happened to me. I think I'm going to need an MRI, but I think I should wait 4 to 6 weeks. And I feel lucky that he was able to respond to me so quickly, because that's something that not every patient gets. And he immediately said, what was your mechanism of injury? I described it, and he goes, I will see you on Thursday.
Wow.
So he knew right away. He was like, you tore your ACL.
Yeah, he knew it was catastrophic. It needed immediate imaging. And so, but before we get to the imaging, which I want to discuss, and we want to pull up the MRI report specifically, you did something with John when you arrived home. What was that?
One of the greatest gifts, I think, is having underlying training in health in general. knowing what to do in the moment, which is why I personally think every patient should have some kind of underlying knowledge of health. Literally 1 to 2 hours post-injury, once I got home, I was already doing some rehab exercises. Not knowing what my injury technically was, but just knowing that I needed to move my leg and find something comfortable. So I just started with regular knee injury type exercises like heel slides, straight leg raise, playing around with range of motion, using ice as needed for pain if I had, because of the pain being so high, but really focusing on movement. And I think that was a cheat code for me and really helped me get better quickly.
And it set the trajectory for your recovery as well. So, okay, let's get on to the MRI report. Pull that up and we're going to read some of the shock horror from that report.
I think the easiest thing to read is going to be the impression section, you guys. So I'll just go in order, but you can imagine my horror thinking that I might have just a meniscus tear, and this is what the report says. Number 1, age indeterminate ACL tear, non-displaced fracture, posterior lateral tibial plateau, and contusion of the posterior medial tibial plateau. Number 2, peripheral tear of the medial meniscus with an associated meniscocapsular separation injury. Number 3, peripheral tear of the lateral meniscus with an associated posterolateral corner injury. Number 4, grade 2 sprain of the MCL. 5, grade 1 sprain of the LCL, and low-grade strain of the distal biceps femoris tendon. Lastly, number 6, large knee effusion. So literally, I thought they mixed my MRI up with someone else.
With someone who'd had a catastrophic motor vehicle accident.
Yes.
Because if you were to narrowly look at that, that is what you would assume.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so from the MRI, you consult with your surgeon, then what?
We immediately met for a consultation. He sat me down to describe the MRI report further in depth, which I think was really helpful. And we kind of went over our options. At this point, we had already discovered a new surprise, however. And that surprise happened just a few days after the injury. I was really, really nauseous, like sick to my stomach. And I honestly thought it was because of how high my pain levels were. But by the time that I was scheduled to meet with him in person, I believe maybe 7 to 10 days had gone by. So I had already gotten this news. My nausea did not get better when my pain levels shifted post-injury. So I thought, okay, this is so strange. Why am I so sick? So I ended up taking a pregnancy test. I currently have a 3-year-old daughter. I've been married for 5 years. We knew at some point we wanted more children. I did not realize the events would play out the way that they did. But turns out, shocker, I find out a few days later after this injury, I am literally pregnant with another kid.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And so part of the consult was actually talking about my pregnancy and how that does influence the surgical options. It influences your rehab options. And I just feel so fortunate that the orthopedic surgeon cared enough. Like, me marking pregnant on a piece of paper was not just a checkbox to him. It truly mattered for the course of action that was going to take place next.
Yeah. And I think what is so instructive, and we've got to give a positive shout out to your surgeon here, because his emphasis, his prioritization of your individual case, your individual need, and notably your pregnancy, it guided the course of care here on out from this point positively, such that you are here today. And we won't give any spoilers as to what happened, but that was a tremendously well-handled moment by that surgeon. So big shout out to him. What is his name?
He's Dr. Kendall Hamilton, and he works here in Grand Rapids, Michigan through Corewell Health. And he's just incredible. I mean, he literally took the time in that visit to give me all surgical options possible. We talked about when during pregnancy surgery is even possible. We talked about what pain approaches look like both during and after the procedure. We talked about postpartum care. He even took the time to go over a nursing plan for me after surgery, which is something that he just didn't have to do. And here I am, obviously emotional, trying to keep it together in front of this man, right? Who's never had kids personally himself in that way. But he knew the importance to sit me down and tell me, here's what matters right now. Here are the medications you can take postpartum. Here's when I recommend getting surgery. He could have operated during pregnancy, after pregnancy, whenever he wanted to. But he specifically told me my options were second trimester with maternal fetal medicine or if I wanted to do postpartum, waiting until the 4-month mark because the graft wouldn't take otherwise.
Amazing.
Which is something I never even thought of.
He so well handled and balanced the 3 pillars of evidence-based care, which is clinical experience, what the research indicates, and patient preferences. And in this particular case, the patient preferences were paramount. So you were pregnant. Now, okay, so at this point, he consults with you. You now need to consult with some other healthcare providers, and you start experiencing some of the challenges of the silos in healthcare. Let's discuss that. Talk to us about that.
I think the biggest thing with knee injuries, most notably ACL injuries, there's a huge disconnect in the world of rehab and what that looks like. So for me, I had a decision to make. Am I going to get the surgery done in the 2nd trimester of my pregnancy, or am I going to wait until the end? And at the time, I was in so much pain and I was so physically disabled. I was non-weight bearing because of the fractures. I literally couldn't bend or straighten my leg. Like, it was just stuck in this unique position. And so at the time, I'm thinking, like, surgery is incredibly necessary and we need to do it fast. Like, how am I going to gain 30 pounds and take care of a toddler?
Right.
So I spoke with my OB first, for obvious reasons. And they immediately, no questions asked, like literally 0 questions, said we're operating 2nd trimester. They didn't ask me what I wanted. They didn't ask me what my goals were. They didn't educate me on risks or anything like that. And I have a wonderful OB office. I just think that the management of such a severe musculoskeletal case is something that they're not familiar with. And they were very honest about that, I feel like. You could tell it wasn't a major area that they've gone through before. They were kind of scared to look at my leg when I would come in for appointments. And they were always astonished by the case. Right. So that was already a barrier where I felt like I wanted to approach my OB because they are the authority point here. And I just didn't feel that I got that sense of authority in return.
That makes sense. Okay, so next up, after the OB?
Next up was physical therapy. I knew that I needed something to get me better, and research online was not very helpful. There's a lot of miscommunication on the internet about these injuries. Some people think surgery is immediately necessary. Some people are actually leaning more toward waiting, and there's this new plethora of studies that are coming out about non-surgical ACL care, especially for those who are not professional athletes, which I'm very much not. Yeah. So I started out online. I started contacting every PT I knew. I posted in chiropractic forums online. I posted everywhere I could, just like pretty much desperately asking for help. And the responses that I would get back were so varied. Nobody knew anything. So I felt very lost, which I'm sure a lot of patients go through, especially with the world of chronic illness and chronic pain. It's easy to feel that way, but it was the first time I had felt that as a patient. Yeah. So it was very challenging. So every physical therapist I talked to, for the most part, basically were terrified because of the pregnancy. They were like, I don't even know what you can handle. Maybe you can handle phase 1 rehab now, but what happens when you're in 2nd try, 3rd try? Right. What happens if you gain 80 pounds? Like, everyone was so horrified. So I felt very lost, didn't know who to turn to. And then very last minute, I remembered this incredible physical therapy office on the complete opposite side of my town, 30 minutes away. And I had remembered how they were just so different in their PT approach. They were extremely individualized with their care. They've already worked with very complex cases, and I reached out to them and they were not afraid at all. So I immediately started working with them, and they were very willing to kind of go through the journey with me and make changes to my care depending on how I changed week by week. And it was the best thing I could have ever done.
Fantastic. Now, that was obviously an inflection, a turning point, which was helpful. But leading up to that, what you described in terms of feeling like you were lost at sea must have contributed to some depression, emotional issues. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, and for those who know me, you know that I tend to be a more upbeat person. I generally, err on the side of positivity. And it definitely it put me in a unique place where every day was kind of dark at first. I think finding out I was pregnant definitely gave me some motivation. But in the moment, I was questioning, am I ever going to be able to be a chiropractor again? Like, will I ever be able to take care of my patients? Will I be disabled forever? Even if I get surgery, am I going to have knee problems for life? Will I need a knee replacement someday? All of these thoughts were going through my head. And then on top of that, the other thing was being a mom. I couldn't give my daughter a bath. And to be honest, I couldn't for maybe 3 to 4 months.
Wow.
And for me, I'm with my daughter the majority of the time. I felt such a limitation with that, which does mess with your mental capacity. You don't feel like you're an adequate provider for your kid anymore.
Failing your responsibilities.
Correct.
Yeah.
So definitely a state of depression, and I feel very grateful to have gotten out of it quickly. But if it wasn't for that physical therapist, gosh, I think it could have been a lot longer of a... He reminded me that it's okay to be in a bad state when you know where you're going. And he was working with me week by week, month by month. We were always working on functional goals, making sure I was forward progressing at all times. Didn't matter if that progression was small.
Small increments.
Yeah, there were some months where I was able to do so much better, and there were some months where it felt like a slower progression. But it didn't matter because he motivated me along the way as a great healthcare provider.
So his role, it seems, was crucial and helpful in giving you a sense of stability and direction. Was his role in the early education and the understanding of the injury helpful as well? Did he enlighten you as to the clinical nuances and the projected course of care, the whatever else goes with the entire course of the handling of this?
I do feel like his sense of comfort with my situation helped with that. So he already had a child, he was married, had gone through the whole pregnancy journey personally. So I feel like he knew more in that respect. And anything he didn't know, you could tell he went to go learn and came back with for future visits, which I could see. So I appreciated the effort in that. And if there was ever something he didn't know, it was almost nice to hear, I'm not sure. We're going to try this and let's reevaluate in 2 weeks. And
Fantastic.
That is very important as a patient, because you don't technically want a provider who thinks that they know everything.
Yeah.
Or you don't want a provider to pretend like they know something when they clearly don't either. So that alone was very helpful. And then he did educate me a lot about ACLs. I'm very informed on spinal rehab, but I definitely wasn't as informed when it comes to this specific injury. And so I learned a lot through that process through him. And he had already had a few ACL injury patients that either obviously got the operation or did not. So I felt like he had seen the alternative approach where a lot of physical therapists have not.
Okay, so multiple months transpired that you work your way through the rehab. How does it go? Talk us through like the increments of the months.
Yeah.
And your function at home, your ability to lift your daughter, bath her, and be a mom and a chiropractor.
I'd say the first 3 to 4 weeks I was worthless. And that's unfortunately the best way to state it. I couldn't help at home with anything. I couldn't go to work. I had to hire a locum tenens provider to take care of my patients. At the time, I had a team of 6, so I was trying to manage them on the side, but I was sick from first trimester pregnancy. I was in pain. So trying to manage a business and do all of those things, it was obviously a unique time.
Had you firmly decided on no surgery at that point?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. I was still thinking I would get it, but I was thinking it would either be second trimester or immediately, after postpartum. Like I mentioned, OB had already given me the go-ahead. And when I got that information and talked to my surgeon again, he actually was the one who reminded me, like, it's okay to wait. Let's just see how this goes. Let's focus on the baby. Focus on what happens over the next few months. He was so much more focused on my baby's health and the status of my pregnancy instead of cutting my leg open.
That's amazing.
It's incredible.
What an incredible surgeon that he wasn't quick to cut.
Yes.
Which is often the accusation that many folks level at surgeons. So he handled that so well. And in tandem with the physical therapist, was there an interdisciplinary role that the surgeon and physical therapist played during this time?
No, and I think it has a lot to do with the area you reside in. I'm in an area of Michigan where there's just unfortunately not a lot of communication between provider types and specialties. I think people are open to it here. It just doesn't exist in our systems. The hospital systems don't really allow for it a ton outside of, a faxed referral, which is very different from my background. I was fully trained at a VA hospital on the East Coast where you are regularly meeting with other specialty types to learn and grow from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason in this area, there's just not a lot of that. So they weren't on the same page clinically, but I was just fortunate that I ended up with two providers who cared about me as the individual.
Right.
So it did feel like there was some cohesiveness, but perhaps not direct.
And we'd love to see that. And that's what this podcast is about, is to advance value-based healthcare, one element of which is firm, cohesive, interdisciplinary care. And that's something we'd love to see. And in your case, we'd have loved to have seen that more robustly executed, but it wasn't. But it's okay. You're still here, and you haven't gone under the knife just yet. So talk to us about that. How many months down the line are we from this?
So currently I am 7 months post-injury, almost 8. And after the 3 to 4 month post-injury mark, I turned a huge corner. Those first 3 to 4 months were very aggressive with rehab. I finally did go back to work, but I was extremely limited. I mean, very limited. The pain levels did improve, which is wonderful. So the primary source of my pain were the fractures. And as most everyone listening to this, as you know, these types of fractures can essentially heal on their own in a, give or take 6 to 8 week period. So once I got through that, my pain levels got better week by week by week. I was able to do more with rehab, be more active. I saw a huge improvement during that time. Fast forward past the 4 month mark, all of a sudden I'm pain-free and I have no instability. To this day, clinically, it does not make sense to me, but I accepted it with open arms. It took us to the next level of physical therapy. He had me back doing barbell exercises, single-legged squats. I mean, we're crazy stuff as a 20-week pregnant person, and I think, again, having a provider who was not scared to progressively load me, not scared to test things. Very often he would say, we're going to work these exercises in and let's just see what happens. And we got very fortunate. There was only one exercise that ever bothered me. And guess what? He knew exactly what to swap and exactly what to change. And he had no reservation of accepting that was a failure. He didn't make me feel bad because I couldn't do this one specific exercise. We just determined, hey, that's not the one for us. And it was a knee flexion based exercise. He just gave me 2 or 3 other ones that had the same underlying goal, and those ones felt great. That's great. He individualized my care to make sure I was hitting the goals that I wanted to hit. Which at the time were not pain based. I didn't have any pain.
So he recognized that no 2 cases are the same.
Yes.
Highly individualized the course of care, and all the while you're getting bigger and bigger and bigger with a pregnant belly.
Yeah.
And I must say, sitting here next to Rebecca, her belly is large, and she has 2 functional knees. And yesterday, when I arrived to do the podcast recording, she was walking down a flight of stairs. I should say leaping down a flight of stairs. And it was, 3 stairs?
Yeah.
She jumped down this flight of stairs, landed on the bad leg. I nearly freaked and died on the spot. And looked at her and said, you know what you just did? And she didn't even realize that she'd done that. So, tell us about that. I mean, amazing that your function is just so adequate.
And here's why it matters. I'm finally at the point where I know I'm not fully healed, but I know that I've put so much effort in to get to the place I am today with the help of incredible providers. But in that moment, I didn't even think about my knee. When I'm at work in a single-legged stance, or when I'm taking care of my daughter, or I have to fall to my knees to grab a toy for her, I'm not thinking about my knee anymore. But what would have happened if I would have started with providers that created fear avoidance patterns within me? What would have happened if I saw a provider that told me, you know what, you're probably going to be like this for a year or 2. It's not even worth trying to improve until this baby's out of you. Right? Or what if I would have allowed someone to make me feel like I would have been damaged for the rest of my life?
Right.
This is why value-based care is so important, because that could have very well been me. I could have had some sense of disability forever, but instead I, by the grace of God, ended up with providers who really really cared about me as the individual. And that's what we're trying to educate people with when it comes to this podcast. We're trying to improve outcomes. We're trying to improve patient experience, but we also want to make sure that these patients feel like they're getting the appropriate care. Mm-hmm. Long gone are the days where it's just acceptable to get a procedure done and mark off a checkbox. There's so much more to healthcare now.
And all the while, limiting unnecessary cost.
Correct.
So what you've just described is essentially value in healthcare, which is quality over costs. And that is, all things considered, even though you were not in a really cohesive, interdisciplinary environment in which all the stakeholders were working together, you nonetheless have had a valuable experience. You've experienced value-based healthcare. And here you are functioning as a normal mom, a chiropractor. You just finished your last day of practice yesterday, and you're expecting baby soon, and you haven't had surgery, and you haven't outlaid enormous costs. You haven't lost a great deal in your practice. This is what we want value-based healthcare to be.
Exactly.
So, phenomenal story. Anything you want to end off on? Any encouragements that you want to give to the docs listening?
I think it's important for providers to remember that we are not invincible and these things can happen to us as well. And I think when I look back on this 5 to 10 years from now, that's what it's going to do for me. I was already obsessed with value-based care, but this really solidified how important it is to be this kind of provider. Overnight, systems are not going to change in hospitals. Overnight, insurance companies are not going to make the changes that we all need to make. But we are so influential as an individual provider. And I hope that listening to my story really helps everyone listening in recognizing that.
That's a great note to end on. Rebecca, thank you.
Yeah.
Good luck with your birth. Good luck with being a mom. And we look forward to the next episode.
Appreciate it. Hang tight for the next episode, everyone.
Thank you for tuning in to the Provider's Report. We hope you found today's episode valuable and inspiring. To stay updated with our latest episodes, subscribe to our podcast wherever you like to listen. For more resources and continuing education opportunities, visit our website. Together, we can make a difference in the lives of our patients and truly set a standard for value-based healthcare.